What's going on, everyone? This is Kevin here, and in this video, we're going to be checking out the best cheap Metro by T-Mobile smartphones of 2022. So let's get started. Now, all of these devices are sold at Metro by T-Mobile, which, if you're not aware, used to be called MetroPCS, and all of these phones are less than $200. Now, I'm going to go one by one with each of these devices, and then at the end of the video, I'll give you my top picks. Now, first up is the Samsung Galaxy A03s. Now, the A03s is a relatively new device to Metro, and it is one of the more lower-end options from Samsung. Now, despite being a low-end phone, the A03s actually brings quite a bit to the table. Now, the first thing that's really awesome about this phone is that we're getting a very large 6.5-inch display. Now, this display features PLS LCD technology. It is a 720p display, but things do look decently crisp and clear here. We're getting a PPI of 270, a 20:9 aspect ratio, so a more narrow but taller form factor, and an 81.8% screen-to-body ratio. So decently small bezels. However, the bottom bezel is a bit thicker, and up top here, we do have a water drop notch. And in that notch is a 5-megapixel front-facing camera that does support portrait mode. Now, internally here with the device, we're getting 32 gigabytes of internal storage. So not a ton of internal storage, but thankfully the phone does support microSD card expansion so that you can offload various photos, videos, and other files. There's no wireless charging with the phone, but we do have a fingerprint sensor mounted on the power button. So that's nice and responsive. The phone also has face unlock. Then on the back side of the device, we have a triple camera setup with a 13 megapixel main camera, a 2 megapixel macro camera for close-up images, and a 2 megapixel depth sensing camera so you can get portrait mode with the rear cameras as well. Now, this device features 3 gigabytes of RAM paired up with the MediaTek Helio P35. I ran a Geekbench 5 benchmark test with the device, and here are the scores that I got. So I'll be showing you the various scores for all the phones throughout this video. Now, what I recommend doing is running this test on your current phone so that you're able to see whether or not any of these devices are actually going to be a performance upgrade compared to your current phone. Now, video recording with the A03s maxes out at 1080p with the front and rear cameras. We're getting a 5,000 milliamp hour internal battery with the phone. So a very large battery, and at least at the time that I'm recording this video, the device features Android 11. Now, on the left side of the phone, we just have the slot for the microSD card and SIM card. On the right side of the phone, we have the power button, that's also the fingerprint sensor, volume down and volume up. Then up top here, we have the noise canceling microphone, and then on the bottom of the device, we have the 3.5mm headphone jack, microphone, USB-C port for charging and data transfer, and the speaker. And then, on the back of the phone, we have the Samsung logo and the camera module. Now, next up is the Motorola Moto G Pure. Now, the Moto G Pure, just like the A03s from Samsung, features a 6.5-inch display. In fact, the entire form factor here is pretty similar in general. So the display is 6.5 inches, we're getting an IPS LCD display that is 720p, we're getting a PPI of 270, a 20:9 aspect ratio, so a narrow but taller form factor, and we're getting an 80.6% screen-to-body ratio. So pretty small bezels. We do have a thicker bottom bezel here, and then up top, we do have a water drop notch. So at least when you're viewing the phone face on, it's essentially almost the same as the A03s. So certainly a lot of similarities here. Now, beyond that, we do have a 5-megapixel front-facing camera. We have 32 gigabytes of internal storage with microSD card expansion as well. There is no wireless charging, but we do have a fingerprint sensor on the back of the phone. And we also have face unlock with the phone as well. So the fingerprint sensor is nice and responsive. I probably would have preferred to have it be on the power button instead of the back of the phone, but I'm at least glad that we are getting it here, considering that the Moto G Pure is certainly a low-end Android device. And then on the back of the phone, we have a dual camera setup featuring a 13 megapixel main camera and a 2 megapixel depth sensing camera to assist with portrait mode. So this phone does have portrait mode on both the front and rear cameras, but unfortunately, with this device, there is no macro camera. Now, internally with the phone, we have 3 gigabytes of RAM paired up with the MediaTek Helio G25 processor. So I also ran a Geekbench 5 benchmark test with this device, and I'll show you the score from that test right now, but essentially a single core score of 133 and a multi-core score of 497. And then with this device, we have 1080p video recording with both the front and rear cameras. We have a 4,000 milliamp hour internal battery, so a pretty big battery, but a little bit smaller than what we're getting with the A03s. And we're getting Android 11 with this device. and it does feature Motorola skin. Now, at least with Motorola devices, things do look pretty close to stock Android here, so Motorola doesn't really change up too much. They just add in their own bonus features. Now, taking a closer look at the hardware, this phone is made completely of plastic, besides the display, which is glass. But despite that, the phone does feel of decent quality and certainly doesn't feel necessarily cheap. Now, taking a look at the left side of the phone, we have the slot for the microSD card and SIM card. Then, on the right side of the device, the power button, volume down, volume up. Then up top here, we have a 3.5mm headphone jack and noise-canceling microphone. And then on the bottom of the phone, we have the microphone, USB-C port for charging and data transfer, and the speaker. And then on the back of the phone, we have the camera module, the Motorola logo, which is on the fingerprint sensor, and that's pretty much it. Now next up is the T-Mobile Revel V. Now, as the name implies, this device is exclusive to T-Mobile and Metro by T-Mobile, and it's also extremely affordable. In fact, I bought this phone from Walmart for just $79. So it's certainly a very low-end option, but you're not paying too much for it either. Now with this device, we're getting a 6.52-inch display, so also a large display, like the first two devices that I showed you. The display itself is IPS LCD. It is a 720p display, maybe not quite as bright as the first two though. And we're getting a PPI here of 269, and we're getting a 20:9 aspect ratio. So a narrow but taller form factor, just like the first two phones as well. Now this device does feature another similarity in its form factor in the sense that it has a thicker bottom bezel and then a water drop notch up top. And in that notch is a 5-megapixel front-facing camera. Now, even though this phone is extremely low end, again, I'm really glad that we're at least getting quite a bit here. And you can see that the display is pretty crisp and clear looking in general, and certainly not what you'd expect for a phone that's this inexpensive and affordable. We're getting 32 gigabytes of internal storage with the device, along with microSD card expansion. We do not have wireless charging, but we do have a fingerprint sensor on the power button. So I'll give that a try right now. And very fast and responsive, that's for sure. Very impressive there. In fact, it might even be faster than the first two phones that I showed you. Now this phone also supports face unlock, which is really good. And then we do have a dual camera setup on the back. So we have a 13 megapixel main camera and a 2 megapixel depth sensing camera. Now unfortunately, with this phone, we only have portrait mode for the rear camera and no portrait mode for the front facing camera, but for a very affordable, extremely affordable, low-end device, I suppose you really can't ask for too much. Now the processor that we're getting here is actually the same as the Moto G Pure, which is the MediaTek Helio G25, and just like that device as well, we're also getting 3 gigabytes of RAM. So you've probably noticed already, but many of these devices have very similar specifications, but that's because they all essentially compete with each other. But I did run a Geekbench 5 benchmark test with the T-Mobile Revel V, and I'll show you the scores right now from that test. I got a single core score of 145 and a multi-core score of 817. So again, compare this to your current phone to see how this phone compares. Now video recording is limited at 1080p for the front and rear cameras. We are getting a pretty large 4000 milliamp hour internal battery, and this device does feature Android 11. And from the looks of it, it does look like pretty much stock Android. There really aren't too many things added here to the operating system, but if you are someone that is a fan of stock Android, then I suppose you'll definitely like this device. Now, one thing that does set this phone especially apart from the first two phones that I showed you is the style of it. So when you're looking at it face on, it does look pretty similar, but everywhere else, it is pretty unique and different. So this phone definitely features more of a boxier design. It actually reminds me a bit of the iPhone 13, but really just in the sense that it is boxy. On the left side of the phone, we have the slot for the microSD card and SIM card. On the right side of the phone, we have the power button, that's also the fingerprint sensor, volume down and volume up. Then up top here, we have a 3.5mm headphone jack and noise-canceling microphone. Then on the bottom of the phone, we have the microphone, USB-C port for charging and data transfer, and we have the speaker. And then on the back of the device, we have the T-Mobile logo, and then the dual camera setup, along with the flash. But I'm a big fan of this material on the back of the phone. It does pick up some fingerprints, but I really like this kind of matte plastic finish to it. It also has a little bit of a waviness look to it in addition to that. So in general, I think this phone definitely looks a lot more expensive than it actually is, which is something that I, of course, always appreciate. Now, the materials are completely made out of plastic besides the display, which is glass. So this is not metal on the sides. This is plastic as well. But again, despite that, I feel like the phone does look unique. It certainly doesn't seem to be copying off either of the first two phones that I showed you. And in general, I think it definitely is something to consider. Now, this next device is known as the TCL 20XE. Now, TCL was actually kind enough to send this phone out to me, which I certainly appreciate, but this is another option, and it is of course available at Metro by T-Mobile. Now, this device is probably one of the better devices out of all the ones that you're going to be seeing today, but it still is very affordable. Now, with this phone, we're getting a 6.52-inch display, we're getting an LCD display, it is 720p. In fact, all of these phones have 720p displays. We're getting a PPI of 269, and we're getting a 20:9 aspect ratio. So you can see the display certainly does look really good. And in fact, TCL, which has a very long reputation in making TVs, actually prides themselves on taking that technology that they've learned over the years and perfected, and they've applied it to their smartphones. So even though this is a low-end device, the display does have really nice colors, and in general looks really good for a lower-end phone. Now, the front-facing camera is 5 megapixels. We are getting portrait mode for both the front and rear cameras, which is really good as well. We're getting 32 gigabytes of internal storage with this phone. We're also getting a fingerprint sensor on the rear of the device, which is nice and fast and responsive. We're also getting face unlock with the phone too, which I definitely appreciate. And then we are getting a triple camera setup with the device. So we're getting a 13 megapixel main camera, a 2 megapixel depth sensing camera, and a 2 megapixel macro camera for close-up images. Now, internally with the phone, we're getting 3 gigabytes of RAM paired up with the MediaTek Helio P22 processor. Now, I ran a Geekbench 5 benchmark test with this phone as well, and I'll show you the scores from that test right now. But essentially, I got a single core score of 152 and a multi-core score of 862. Now, video recording with this phone does max out at 1080p with both the front and rear cameras. And this device does feature a 5,000 milliamp hour internal battery. So a nice big battery with this phone that will definitely provide you at least a full day of usage. Now, this device in general has a pretty stock version of Android. However, TCL has added in a variety of their own bonus features. And in general, all the modifications and features that have been added to this phone by TCL are certainly actual good features. They're not gimmicky by any means. For example, in this app drawer, you have all these different options for how to organize the apps. And I suppose this one might be a little bit of a gimmick, but organizing them by color is one option. So I think this is really cool how essentially it creates a rainbow of all of your different apps. So that's just one example of a feature that TCL has added to this device, but there's many others. Now, the hardware of this phone is made completely out of plastic besides the display, which is glass. On the left side of the phone, we have the slot for the micro SD card and SIM card. Then on the right side of the phone, we have the power button, volume down and volume up. Then up top here, we have the 3.5mm headphone jack, also the noise canceling microphone. And then on the bottom of the device, we have the microphone, USB-C port for charging and data transfer, and the speaker. And then on the rear of the phone, we have the camera module, fingerprint sensor, and TCL logo. So in general, a pretty minimalist, relatively plain phone here, but at the same time, it's a pretty solid handset and certainly very affordable. And then the final phone that I'm going to show you today is the OnePlus Nord N100. Now, this device has been out for a little bit at this point on Metro, but it does bring a lot of value to the table here. And there are some unique features with this phone as well that you really can't find with the first 4 phones that I showed you. Now, this device does have a 6.52-inch display. It is an IPS LCD display, and it is 720p. However, this is a 90 Hz display, which means that it has a faster refresh rate compared to 60 Hz with the first 4 phones that I showed you in this video. So with a 90 Hz refresh rate, when navigating around the phone, things are going to look a lot smoother here, and just gives the phone kind of a more premium touch. In addition to that, we're getting a PPI of 269, a 20:9 aspect ratio, and an 82.9% screen to body ratio. And out of this list of phones, the OnePlus Nord N100 is the only device that actually has a hole punch for the front-facing camera, which is really awesome. Another nice thing too is that the front-facing camera is 8 megapixels, and we're getting 64 gigabytes of internal storage with this device, as well as micro SD card expansion. Now, there's no wireless charging with the phone, but we do have a fingerprint sensor on the back of the device, so I'll give that a try right now. Pretty fast and responsive, nice and accurate, which is good. This phone also has face unlock, which is really nice as well. Now, this phone does have a triple camera setup, featuring a 13 megapixel main camera, a 2 megapixel macro camera, and a 2 megapixel depth sensing camera. And the device does support portrait mode for the front and rear cameras. Now, internally, with this device, we're getting 4 gigabytes of RAM paired up with the Qualcomm Snapdragon 460 processor. So this is the only phone out of these 5 that has a Qualcomm processor, so that is something worth considering. but also it does have the highest amount of RAM of any of these devices as well. Now, I did run a Geekbench 5 benchmark test with this phone, just like I did with all the others, and I'll show you the scores from that test right now. And you can see I got a single core score of 251 and a multi-core score of 1172. So certainly one of the better performing phones out of these 5. Now, this device features 1080p video recording for both the front and rear cameras. We're getting a 5,000 milliamp hour internal battery, and what's really nice too is that the battery does support 18 watt fast charging. And the phone also does come with an 18 watt fast charger as well. So here is the charger. So it is nice to see a premium charger included, despite this being a low-end offering. Now, this phone is made completely out of plastic, besides the display, which is glass. We do have a glossy band running around the sides of the phone, which does make it look a bit more premium. On the left side of the device, we have the slot for the micro SD card and SIM card. We have volume up, volume down. Then on the right side of the phone, we have the power button. Then up top here, we have the noise canceling microphone. And then on the bottom of the phone, we have the 3.5mm headphone jack, microphone, USB-C port for charging and data transfer, and the speaker. And then, I really like this, on the back of the phone, we do have this matte finish that does have kind of a wavier look to it. It does look nice and premium, and it certainly does make the phone at least appear to be a bit more expensive than it actually is. But we have the camera module with the flash, fingerprint sensor, and OnePlus logos. So in conclusion, it's really nice that we do have so many different budget options from Metro. And I think each of these phones has one or two things that makes it stand out from the others. But in general, it does seem like the OnePlus Nord N100 does offer the most features and best specifications of all these devices. But there's certainly more to it than just the specifications. Different phones offer different features, whether it's software or hardware related. So that's definitely worth keeping in mind as well. But I would say in general, the Nord N100 does stand out the most. I do really like the TCL 20XE as well. That's another good budget phone that still brings quite a few premium features to you. The Revel V is probably my least favorite phone out of all of these, just because it is so low end, but it also is the most affordable pick of them. The Moto G Pure doesn't really bring too much interesting to the table, but at the same time, it's going to be a good, reliable device. And as far as things go with the Galaxy A03s, if you already use a Samsung phone, then you are going to feel very familiar with this device. So that's certainly good. And Samsung does have a really good reputation for long-term reliability. So there's definitely a lot of things to consider about all of these devices. And maybe the other thing to take away as well is that from time to time, different phones out of these will be on sale. So for example, there might be a certain promotion going on where the TCL 20XE is being offered for free, or maybe the Moto G Pure is being offered for free. They kind of switch it up between the different devices throughout the year. So really based on the time that you're shopping, one deal might really stand out from another. And if that's the case, then that's certainly a big factor to consider as well. Because for the most part, these devices are very similar. But this concludes my video on the best cheap Metro by T-Mobile and MetroPCS smartphones. Hopefully you enjoyed it, and I will see you in the next video. Take care and have a great rest of your day.